And she was like, what the f are you talking about? And I was like, and at that moment, I realized I did not know what the f I was talking about. Everything fell apart for me in that moment. I realized that I knew nothing. I knew an attitude and vague information I got from growing up in a wealthy community and from a Catholic church. To politics, clarity is kind of everything, because you don't want to tell people to f off, and you don't want to tell people that they're dumb, because there but for the grace of God go you. You know, all these people who are so stupid are usually just people who didn't have access to things that you had access to because you had more resources. I mean, you too could be a dummy. I mean, that's what to remember. I mean, most of these people are you, except they just didn't run into the right people who changed their perspectives. They stayed in their childhood bubble. You have to be somewhat understanding that you were not born woke. You did not come out of the womb anyway. You know, if you were in the wrong circumstances, you probably could be a racist also. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't some people who are just bad apple people. Like, maybe there are some people who have some brain problems who are just violent from birth. But usually atmosphere, nurture has something to do with it. It's not just nature, it's nature and nurture. So if you happen to be lucky enough to have good information and be woke as a result of that, I mean, I think it's a nice idea to try to make other people aware of that information. But constantly gloating about how woke you are and calling other people idiots is extremely short-sighted if you're, really serious about changing the world. You're not going to change it by just gloating about how great your information is. I mean, because I feel like most people are kind, they just don't have very good information,
I absolutely strongly agree with that. And, that's definitely something, especially in the Trump era, that we've seen. I think a lot of people on the left have this like, they're racist, they're irredeemable. I think the vast majority of people really, it's really born out of ignorance, and their sense of empathy maybe is a little bit screwy, but I think that we need to be better about communicating with even those people who we think are quote, too far gone, which can be really difficult because a lot of those people are assholes.
If my ex-girlfriend hadn't taken pity on me in college and told me some stuff I needed to hear, because she loved me and understood that I just didn't know what I was talking about because of where I grew up. I would have not, if she just called me an idiot and broken up with me, I probably would have just ended up even more resentful and more dug in with my fake republicanism that I grew up with. Like, luckily, she blew my mind with some information that I just didn't know about. Like, I don't have to get into specifics, but I can. I mean, basically, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and they have, that is a homophobic organization, and they teach you that homosexuality is a sin. And I grew up in an area where that was not something that was discussed beyond that. It was the kind of area in the 1980s where homosexuality was largely under the rug, and there were no gay people anywhere, as far as I knew in my town. Because it was not safe for them to be gay in that environment. But that led me to believe like there were very few gay people in the world. You know what I mean? Like in my bubble, it was like, oh, I guess there aren't any gay people anyway. So maybe it is true that they're sinners or whatever, because they must be some kind of weirdo because I don't see any of them around here. Mm-hmm. Unbeknownst to me, they're all around me, because of where I grew up and, there's it had been an atmosphere where you could believe there were no gay people because it was a stupid atmosphere. So, or, violent or dangerous atmosphere to be gay in. So I go to college and my girlfriend's talking to me, and she's grew up in a very diverse community in St. Louis. And her mother was like super, her mother didn't call herself woke because that was not a thing, but her mother was like, very like open about talking about sex and about, and her mother was very, very the kind person who loved gay people. And she was aware of gay people, and she was aware of how AIDS was transmitted and all kinds of things. And I went to college, and I was talking to her about, she said something about AIDS or something about gay people. And I was like, well, yeah, they're no, I don't like them or something, and she was like, what? I mean, she was like, what? And I was like, well, they started AIDS. And she was like, what the f are you talking about? And I was like, and at that moment, I realized I did not know what the f I was talking about. Everything fell apart for me in that moment. I realized that I knew nothing. I knew an attitude and vague information I got from growing up in a wealthy community and from a Catholic church. And all of a sudden, she said to me, she just said, do you think if homosexuality is a choice, as the Catholic Church, preaches, do you think that these children or teenagers would choose a way of life that guarantees them a harder road for kicks? That's what the concept is. That's the Catholic concept, that this is an aberration by a weak person who just likes crazy sex. And I just, all of a sudden, I was like, no, you are right. You are right. And I don't know what I'm talking about. However, if she said to me in that moment, F you homophobic piece of shit, you idiot.
Maybe I don't know, pushed you in the other direction.
I don't know what would have happened, but I was grateful that she loved me enough to say, no, honey, you have gotten very bad information, and you are a good person, and I'm going to tell you the real information. And it changed me right there, right in that moment, because I realized that I had never had a serious discussion about this with anybody. That where I grew up, it was just this idea that everyone was straight, and all these nonsense beliefs that still exist in this country all over the place. And if you don't get out of that bubble, and if when someone you meet is still in that bubble and they say something to you and you just say, F you, you homophobic idiot, you're losing a chance that person might actually respond to some good information.
Yeah. And I think that, it's not necessarily going to be that simple. Like, you said that you were would describe yourself as a sensitive person. I definitely would, like growing up. And, it really did mostly just take the information and I think for some people that's the case. It's like they literally just need to be disabused of whatever their misconceptions were. And I think but it's not going to be, people should remember, you need a level of patience that maybe isn't required for some people like me and you, but you need to understand that like all the information that people have and all their opinions have been filtered through a very toxic culture where, I always say like this modern marketing was invented in America. Like, why would you not think that like all the cultural mores from things like, homosexuality being an aberration to, just the fact that like this state of wealth inequality is like this is like the best we can do, and your imagination can't really go beyond that point because everything that has been filtered through that viewpoint. Yeah, I
don't think that everybody's going to have some real, like that was a specific, we were already in a liberal arts college. I had grown up with a pretty good education. Not about homosexuality, obviously, but that was not something that was discussed. As I said, it just wasn't a topic. There was no way to evolve on that subject because it just didn't get talked about at all, So having that conversation with my girlfriend was really the first time I'd ever really examined my real feelings about that topic and many other topics, which I just had never examined because that's not a space that there's no examination of in wealthy communities. It's just, do good at sports, make money, drink alcohol. Those are the things that happen in those communities. Evolution is not on the menu. It's just about like, we have resources. We have tons of them. You just have to play your role and you will also have resources. That's what's going on in those communities. That's it. Just follow the rules and you also will be safe. That's all that's happening. No discussions of anything intellectual. It's just like, we got a lot of resources. If you play the game and do certain things certain ways and don't think a lot, you will also have resources. And that's the name of the game. So yeah, it was just thank God I got to college. I mean, who knows? I could be a Republican still. I mean, when I grew up, I was told I was a Republican. I mean, everyone was a Republican, so I thought I was a Republican. I mean, if you don't know about anything else, and your social circle just is the minute you've expressed anything sensitive, they call you gay. There's no room to evolve in those settings. So like, you have to realize that if you did get to go to college and maybe learn some shit, you're lucky, because there's a lot of people who didn't get to. And so maybe don't call them idiots, because a lot of times they just are underprivileged.
Yeah, it's just going to close them off more and make it more.
And I'm not. Yeah, and like what you said though, it's not. It's not going to be like. I was set up. I was a nice person who gotten bad information, and I got some good information, and I changed right away. But that's not necessarily how it's going to go. But certainly, putting out good information is really the name of the game.
And I think that the gay issue is. I've seen that in the past 20 years since I was like in high school. I've seen that issue like just completely turn around as far as like, gay marriage. Yes. That was like one of the biggest things that, if you were a liberal or on the left in any way when, in the early 2000s was like, that was like one of the main issues that you had to argue with right wingers about. And it turned around so quickly. I think partially because gay people started feeling more comfortable to come out. So then more people just knew gay people and knew they weren't like these weirdo sex fiends like they had been like made out to be. Yeah. But also like it's especially in America. And I think just for the most part, people have this general belief. I think the most common opinion is like, hey, I don't care what anybody else does as long as it's not hurting anybody and I can do what I want and I don't want to hurt anybody. I think most people are at least good people to that extent. And it's really fucking hard to have that viewpoint and to be critical of gay people for some reason at the same time. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an example of a cultural shift that came about from people putting out good information, including being honest, like daring to be honest about their sexuality. I mean, like, that's good information. That's daring to do that. But that changed perspectives. Yes. I mean, those people who came out at a time when it was so difficult are heroes because they put out, I am gay. I am a nice person. Now, how do you reconcile your hatred of me? That's like me talking about psychiatric medication. I mean, like, it's not the same. It's much easier for me to talk about psychiatric medication, I realize. But I just mean, like, I always have enjoyed saying, like, I'm on Zoloft, because then everyone else in the room says, oh, fuck, I'm on this, I'm on that, I'm on this, It's like, these conversations are how people destigmatize things that, whatever, basically you shake off your childhood. And if you have a great childhood where you had some really wise parents that told you some really good information, and then, more power to you. Just pass it along, but don't just sit around and talk about how great you are because you had good parents or grew up in a good environment. But just pass along, whatever. Be nice. I mean, be nice. Being mean doesn't really, and that was the thing about alcohol too, is it just made my resentments were all tied up together. So I couldn't figure out what was righteous and what was just petulance. So my stand-up was just so fucking ineffective because I was mixing like actually good social commentary with just adolescent dirtiness. And, just like, it just didn't make any sense. It was like, oh, this guy's got some good ideas, but like, I don't know why is he talking about poopy butts for so long? You know what I mean? Like, that was the sort of problem, and I thought that was like transgressive. I was like, people need to hear poopy butts because that'll make people talk more honestly or something. When it's just fucking absolutely stupid. It's just stupid and it's diluting all the good stuff I was saying because it's like, this guy's a teenager. Alcohol kept me with one foot in being a teenager.
Oh yeah, know exactly what you mean. Yeah, the this sense of being, especially being into like punk music and stuff, and you know, you're talking about like Fugazi and this alternative sort of thing where it's like just being edgy in and of itself, which, you know, can be, I guess, like useful depending on what you're being edgy about. But it's like I had to really grow out of that, like being an atheist and being like an ass about it. And
yes, you know, Bill Maher is an example of a person who's like, you know, not evolved. You know, he's got some, certainly agree with what a lot of what I mean, I used to watch him and like sort of take him seriously, you know, and but his anger, his arrogance ruins everything. I mean, it's just his good points are so, you know, you just, he's an example of that kind of person that's just like, I know the answers. Well, then just pass them along in a nice way. Stop being so smug about it. It's just, there's no point. You know, you're really not going to win any converts. You're just, you know, it feels good to say, yeah, I'm an atheist. You know, it's like, good for you. Like, you know, like that's your hang up. Like, I'm glad you know, it's like, it's just not helpful to just constantly berate people who have different opinions than you, you know. And, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't if someone's like, you know, marching around with a tiki torch, then you should take it and wrap it around their neck. But that's a different.
Absolutely.
I mean, and then talk to them about sensitive topics while they're tied up on the ground.
Yeah, there are, you know, limits, and you know, I do think there is something to the idea of like we shouldn't be tolerant of intolerance, but
no.
You know, that should be the main rule.
And there's some people that are beyond help. If someone's running around in camouflage with an AK-47, they might be too late to talk them down. Hey, listen, I have some really good information for you about homosexuality. You know, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah, and I think the people I've heard, you know, people who are activists, like, you know, gay activists, LGBTQ in general activists in the 80s and onwards, you know, say that like, hey, a lot of the way that the, you know, not to oversimplify it, but like, you know, the left, especially with the social media, Twitter culture and stuff, can be very like mean and rude and write people off. And I've heard, I think it was,
listen to this full episode of Breadsheet to hear the name of the now somewhat problematic person I invoke here.
Talk about how, like, you know, the way that we made homosexuality went from this like taboo that everybody, you know, like you couldn't even talk about, to like where we are today wasn't through berating people and being like mean to them. It was through patience, understanding, and empathy. And it seems to have worked pretty well so far. You know, we still have a ways to go, of course, but.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, those people are, you know, civil rights activists, openly gay people at a time when that was not, you know, safe. Those are the people that, you know, just by example of, you know, standing up and being a good person, you know, that just has an impact because, you know, you just, anyway, it has much more to do with being your best self than it does attacking other people and whatever you're trying to get done.
Absolutely. Well, like I said,